Welcome to the debate. Today we're diving into, well, a topic that is perhaps the ultimate fantasy for anyone trying to master a complex skill. The idea of effortless acquisition. We're talking specifically about sleep learning, this promise that you can absorb a new language, like English, just by playing audio while you sleep, bypassing all the tedious work. It's the ultimate magic shortcut.
Oh, it's profoundly appealing, isn't it? I mean, especially for our audience who are likely juggling demanding jobs, maybe school, family responsibilities, constant chores, you name it. When you're exhausted, that advertisement promising, learn English fast, just listen while you sleep, it holds a powerful, almost irresistible pull.
Issues a very firm and, it seems, unambiguous verdict on the stream. So our central question for today, which arises directly from that finding, is this. Given the extensive scientific record concerning the brain during sleep, are we actually justified in definitively concluding that you cannot learn a new language while sleeping? Or is that conclusion maybe an oversimplification, perhaps neglecting subtle but important distinctions in what we mean by learning?
Right, and I'll be taking that latter stance. While I certainly concede that achieving full communicative competence, fluency, via passive overnight listening is demonstrably unrealistic, I do believe the absolute nature of the scientific rejection, well, it needs careful scrutiny. I think we risk missing valuable nuance there.
Okay, and I will be affirming the source material's definitive rejection. I argue that the simple no is not only scientifically supported, but is actually the most responsible, pragmatic advice we can offer. The path to mastery. Look, it requires sustained commitment and verified active methods.
Well, my core position really challenges the rigidity of the text's assertion that you cannot learn a new language. Now, while the ultimate goal for most students is fluency, right, the ability to understand a movie or comfortably hold a conversation, it seems the scientific conclusion kind of conflates the failure to achieve this complex, high-level goal with the total impossibility of, well, any information assimilation whatsoever. The text explicitly frames the question as, can you really become fluent in English? So if the numerous scientific studies focus predominantly on testing for fluency or, say, complex grammatical acquisition, then declaring that the brain has zero capacity for reinforcement or passive processing during sleep, that feels like an overreach to me. We know the brain is intensely active, consolidating memories, processing information across various sleep stages. To just dismiss the entire mechanism because it doesn't grant the magic shortcut to fluency, it just lacks a bit of scientific precision, I think.
See, my position is grounded much more in utility and, frankly, realistic outcomes for the student. The scientific consensus, built from many years of investigation and many experiments, leads to a simple no. And I think that definitive rejection is crucial because it aligns expectations with reality. We have to steer students toward the proven path. The promise of learning English fast simply by listening to audio files is, I think, rightly labeled a wonderful dream precisely because it fundamentally undermines the actual requirements for language acquisition: conscious practice, sustained attention, and dedicated effort. If we soften this message, if we start allowing for ambiguity by suggesting, oh, well, maybe some tiny part of learning occurs, we risk providing false hope. Hope that encourages people to waste valuable time, maybe money, energy, searching for that magic trick instead of focusing on the real methods that truly work. For a skill as complex and functional as language, if the assimilation doesn't lead to usable comprehension, then for the student, it is equivalent to no learning. That's the practical reality.
Okay, I understand the pedagogical necessity of managing expectations. I really do. But I think we need to unpack what we actually mean by learning here. When you define learning exclusively by functional utility, conversating, watching a film, you are setting a threshold that is arguably too high to address the scientific reality of what the brain is doing. Let's maybe use an analogy. Defining learning just as passive assimilation during sleep. It's a bit like receiving an instruction manual for building a house while you're asleep. Okay, you haven't built the house, you haven't mastered carpentry, but you have possibly received information, maybe on some subconscious level. Your position, however, seems to insist that unless you can immediately wake up and start laying foundation blocks and framing walls, the manual was basically never processed at all.
But that's precisely the point, isn't it? The manual is useless if the builder is asleep. Language isn't just declarative knowledge, facts you know. It's procedural skill. You need to actively practice using it. The scientific findings conclude that while you are in a state of sleep, the complex cognitive mechanisms required to, say, link sounds to meaning, integrate vocabulary into syntax, retrieve information under pressure, they are simply not operational enough to create functional competence. We are talking about helping a student move from zero to conversational. So if these experiments show that sleep listening only generates some abstract, non-utilitarian trace of information, if you still can't order coffee or understand the news the next day, then the responsible summary is still a resounding no. We have to focus on practical language acquisition, not some abstract information transfer that might or might not be happening.
That's a compelling argument regarding utility, I grant you that. But it forces us to look closely at the language we use specifically, calling this whole idea a magic shortcut. Look, the student isn't necessarily seeking abstract information. They are seeking anything that makes their dedicated active study easier or more efficient. If we shut down the scientific inquiry entirely by declaring an absolute impossibility, we might miss subtle mechanisms that could, potentially, complement active study. Think about memory consolidation, for instance. We know that slow-wave sleep, SWS, is vitally linked to consolidating declarative memories, like facts and vocabulary, that were actively learned just before sleep.
Okay, so are you suggesting then that if a student studies, say, 20 vocabulary words right before bed, playing those words on a loop while they sleep might somehow strengthen the memory trace? Is that the idea?
Exactly, or, well, something along those lines. I'm not suggesting they learn 20 new words from scratch, but that the words they just dedicated real conscious effort to studying might be reinforced, even slightly. Now that is a form of learning, or at least memory optimization, isn't it? So when scientists perform these studies and determine the answer is simple, no, are they specifically ruling out this kind of subtle reinforcement mechanism as well? If we just use a broad brush, saying absolutely no language learning can happen, we may inadvertently deter future investigations into making active study more efficient. That definitive rejection, while powerful for managing expectations, it risks prematurely closing the door on discovering potentially useful complementary techniques.
I appreciate the intellectual necessity of nuance, I do. But that brings us directly back to the utility of the magic shortcut rhetoric, which I strongly defend. We are addressing a public that is just bombarded by aggressive commercial claims. If we soften the no to something like, well, okay, maybe some passive reinforcement of previously learned vocabulary occurs, the marketplace will inevitably twist that into, hey, the debate podcast says listening while you sleep works. Buy our amazing new language program. Defending the strong rhetoric, calling it a magic shortcut that is definitively not real, is absolutely crucial, I think, for protecting students from wasting limited resources, time, money, hope on impossible promises. This framing is a necessary ethical defense, really, to manage expectations and encourage them to stop looking for these magical solutions.
Okay, I acknowledge the pressure of the market, absolutely. People are desperate for efficiency because of the heavy demands on their time. But should scientific reporting really be dictated by marketing concerns? I worry that by prioritizing simple, maybe easily digestible pedagogical advice, we risk intellectual oversimplification. What if scientific studies do find that listening during SWS increases vocabulary retention by, let's say, 5%? Now, that's obviously not a shortcut to fluency, not by a long shot, but it is a statistically significant finding relevant to memory processes. Telling the public the answer is a simple no just completely obscures that potential simply because the initial claims, fluency overnight, were wildly exaggerated. The balance here is tricky, isn't it? It's between offering sound, practical advice and maintaining rigorous scientific honesty.
I would argue that scientific honesty in this case actually necessitates practicality. If the increase in retention is only, say, 5%,
Is the time, the potential cost, the effort required to set up and maintain some kind of sleep learning environment really worth that marginal gain? For the practical student seeking competence, the answer is still probably no. And I think that's why the scientific community has largely settled on the simple conclusion. They have studied the various complex sleep stages, REM, NREM, slow wave sleep, for many years, specifically looking for practical language acquisition. And the cumulative findings clearly show that none of these processes facilitate effective learning. Effective meaning learning that actually moves the needle on comprehension and usability.
But this is where the complexity of the data gets obscured by the simplicity of the summary, isn't it? You correctly mentioned the various sleep stages. We know that processes are vastly different during periods like REM sleep, which is essential for, say, emotional memory, versus SWS, which is more linked to declarative memory. So when the scientists conclude it's a simple no, are they saying all experiments across all stages yielded precisely zero evidence of utility? Or are they simply saying that whatever utility was observed was insufficient to justify the label language learning in a meaningful sense? Intellectual rigor, I feel, demands we question the boundaries of that established no. It can't be that simple neurologically.
Right. I believe the simplicity of the answer reflects the totality of the findings relative to the core claim. And the core claim, let's remember, is that you can learn a new language, meaning achieve meaningful competency. The scientific conclusion seems to be that none of the complex processing that occurs across those sleep stages achieves that specific goal effectively enough to be truly useful to the student. So, if decades of research point to a process that requires minimal effort but delivers essentially zero return on the core goal of functional communication, then the simple no is the most accurate, pragmatic, and responsible summary for the target audience. We have to remember that the purpose of the source material here is to guide the student toward actual success.
I understand the duty to guide the student. I really do. But I still maintain that the precise mechanism of failure, whether it's total physiological impossibility or just extremely low yield, it still matters for a complete scientific understanding. If we as experts analyzing this simply accept the simplicity without probing the underlying complexity of memory consolidation during sleep, are we really doing justice to the many years of research that went into generating that simple answer? It may be simple to say, but the neural processes involved are undoubtedly profoundly intricate.
Okay, so to summarize my position, the definitive rejection of sleep learning for language acquisition is, I believe, a necessary and practical conclusion. The pursuit of genuine competence in a new language, that highly rewarding ability to converse freely, understand native media, it requires conscious practice and sustained effort. The source material's rejection of the magic shortcut, therefore, helps move the conversation forward. It allows students to stop searching for tricks and instead dedicate their limited time and energy to the active, proven methods that will actually guarantee results eventually.
And I'll summarize my perspective by, look, agreeing wholeheartedly that achieving fluency demands dedication and hard work. There's no shortcut there. However, I would caution against allowing pedagogical necessity to completely eclipse scientific accuracy. We must remain intellectually open to the nuances of findings concerning the brain's processes during sleep. The blanket statement that you cannot learn a new language risks, I think, conceptually oversimplifying the distinction between achieving robust, usable knowledge and the potential for subtle, passive information processing, or maybe memory reinforcement that could, perhaps in the future, offer some complementary support to active study.
Well, this discussion certainly highlights the enduring tension, doesn't it, between offering useful, pragmatic guidance to those seeking real-world results and, at the same time, maintaining the necessary scientific precision regarding the intricate and often, let's face it, frustrating workings of the sleeping brain.
Indeed. It really demonstrates the importance of understanding the fundamental complexities that often underlie these very attractive, yet ultimately unrealistic claims about rapid learning. There's clearly much more work to be done, much more to understand in this field.